Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Screen Southasia. I'm just going to kick things off by playing the trailer from the film that we've all been watching.
இந்த நாடு சுதந்திரம் அடைஞ்ச நாள்ல இருந்து நாங்க தமிழரா எங்களோட மொழியை சுதந்திரமா பேசுற உரிமை 23ஆம் ஆண்டு ஜூலை மாதம் அந்த இரவு முழு கொழும்பு நகரமும் ஒரு தீச்சுவாலையா மாறி இருந்துச்சு. அந்த தருணத்துல இருந்து இந்த நாட்டுல நான் ஒரு யுத்தத்துக்குள்ள வளர்ந்தேன். 30 வருஷமா தமிழருக்கும் சிங்களவருக்கும் இடையில பகமை வளர்ந்துச்சு. ஆனா அன்னைக்கு இரவு நாங்க அகதிகளாக கொழும்பிலிருந்து தப்பி போனோம். முப்பது வருஷமா தமிழ் போராளிகளுக்கும் இலங்கை இராணுவத்துக்கும் இடையில ஒரு குரூர யுத்தம் நடந்துச்சு.
ஆனால் அது என்ன நடந்தேன்டா அந்த சில இடங்கள்ல நாங்க விட்ட பிள்ளை இப்போ
எங்களோட உண்மையான வலி எப்படி ஒரு கோர பயங்கரமா மாறிச்சு.
Okay. So you've probably all been watching Demons in Paradise over the weekend. And thank you for joining us. I am going to hand over to our chief editor from Himal Southasian, Roman Gautam, who will speak a few words.
Thank you, Raisa. I'm going to get out of the way as quickly as possible because I think we're all here to listen to what Jude has to say, and rightly so. Jude, I just wanted to say a big thank you for sharing your film with us. Enormously powerful. So many parts of it. I mean, there's the act of killing, which is, I'm sure, a film that you're aware of. I'm sure that many others have also watched. There were echoes of that, I think, also in, when I was watching this film, couldn't help but think of that. But also in many ways, I mean, that's a rough comparison. I think, what you've done is also so enormously powerful. This is, of course, a story that needs to be told and retold because so many people would want all of it to be forgotten or various parts of it to be forgotten, but you refuse to forget and you show it in all the different parts that have to be remembered. And you do it through your family, which I think was enormously powerful, but also, I think, just more than anything else, thank you for letting us see to look in to what you have shown. So many parts of the film stuck in my mind. I think, more than anything else, the words of well, it would be your father. I, of course, don't speak Tamil, and I would butcher the Tamil if I even tried, but in English, those beautiful lines beautiful and heartbreaking lines where he says, we make an ocean of our tears, we make boats of our hearts, and our love will be the paddle that takes us across. I mean, yeah. Thank you again for sharing all of that and for giving us a glimpse into your family. And I'm sure that wasn't easy for your family, that entire process, and to have the courage to put that out in the world as well. So on behalf of, I think, everyone, all of us who've been lucky enough to watch the film, thank you to you. Thank you for sharing it with Screen Southasia, and also a massive thank you to your family. I hope that you'll pass that on from all of us. With that, with thanks to the Himal Southasian team behind the scenes, running the show, and especially Alok and Raisa for are leading the way, I will hand it over to them and let the show roll on. Thanks.
Thanks, Roman. Quickly, I'm going to introduce Jude. And on that note, apologize because earlier in some of our promotional material, including on our website, we had given some wrong information in Jude bios. So I'm going to keep it short. Jude Ratnam is a Sri Lankan film director. He worked in NGOs before becoming a filmmaker. And his film Demons in Paradise, which we are going to talk about today, was made over the span of 10 years, along with a French team and Tamil and Sinhalese partners. Demons in Paradise was nominated for 2 awards at the Cannes Film Festival. It also won the Best Film Award at the Ram Bahadur Trophy at Film South Asia 2017. Welcome, Jude, and over to you, Raisa.
Thanks, Alok. So to start things off, I guess we have to start with your journey from the south to the north in the wake of the 1983 violence. Can you tell us about your memories about that journey across the country and your story of migration, essentially?
Thank you for that question, Raisa. First of all, I would like to thank Alok, Roman, and yourself for having me here today. And I have to again just reiterate that I never imagined I would make a film. I was dragged into making a film, or rather, something moved through me, and it got itself made. That's what I keep saying wherever I go. So in that sense, I would want to apologize to any filmmaker whose films were mentioned in the previous bio, and it was by completely by mistake, and there was no intention from any party to offend anyone there, right? I just want to record that here. And to come to your question, Raisa, thinking of 83, what remains in my memory vividly is what you see and hear in the film also is just two things. One, probably the first thing I remember is the train journey, the train, right? And so it's a kind of a paradoxical relationship that you have with this object, with the train, that has the ability to move you from one point to another point. But then it's the very thing that also caused, in some sense, through colonial rule, the atrocities that one witnessed in 83 and then onwards, and even today, in some sense, even though it's not vivid, and I would say it's rather more discreet now than it used to be. So so that's one thing that I remember vividly, and the other thing was my mother's words. So essentially, it's the visual and the oral finally, right? Isn't it? It's the visual of the train and the oral sound of your mother telling you, "Shut up! Don't speak in Tamil." And I think, in some sense, the whole effort of making Demons in Paradise was trying to fathom this gulf between the oral and the visual. So all I remember about the journey was getting into the train in Colombo Fort, and that's it. I can't remember. And then once we came to the Tamil parts, I remember how we flung open the windows, and I still remember that part, yes, where we slept for several nights looking at the stars, because we were so confined to closed spaces in Colombo, being in darkness. So that's one thing that I remember as a child, the windows being flung open, and probably for about a week or two, we slept looking at the stars. So this I remember, and that's all that I remember of the actual journey.
Thank you, Jude. You already touched on trains, and our next question was about trains. trains are such a major part of the film. We go on so many train rides, and initially you have said that you actually wanted to make this films about trains and conflict. What made you want to focus on trains in the beginning, and were you while that focus stakes, what made you change the script to make it more of a personal story?
That was accidental, right? So initially there was this whole idea as you would read in my bio, I had for some time got into doing some work with NGOs especially during the ceasefire. So I think it was a stint was from 2000 till about 2004 until the tsunami struck, right? So that was the time that I was working in the NGOs in Colombo, and so I had the opportunity of traveling to the war-torn areas. And during the ceasefire in 2002, that led me into these zones where the war was formally fought, and that's where I think uh, the I would call it the dismemberment of the railways from the topography of the physique of Sri Lanka was um, 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 quite ingrained, or rather, I would even say that visiting the LTT controlled areas and to see all these ravaged was, I think, kept working in my mind somehow. And that's how I came when, again, as I keep saying, I don't think I will make another film either, and this is probably the only film that I will make as well. So because I was dragged into it, so when the opportunity came through the French embassy to propose an idea for film, for me the first thing that came to me was this of the dismemberment of the north and south through the railways, and this is what I proposed. But then I started writing about it, and it was very didactic, reading about the conflict and of having my own experiences of traveling and all that. But until very lately in the project, probably because initially I shot the train and there was a teaser which looked cinematic, and then that's what led me into France, and where the producer, I worked with her for 2 years, and at one point after, which was in maybe in after probably after the war ended, and this was in 2009 latter part, that because I had started working on the film since 2007, she just came up because I had written somewhere about this experience of uh, escaping in the train in 1983. And then she said, you know what, probably the actual film lies here. And that's where I was a bit hesitant because to put yourself into this big meta theater of conflict and death and all that, and to suddenly to say, and I didn't want to make a narcissistic film either. So hesitantly, but I think the hunch of Julie, my producer, again, I think something feminine, because she was also in confinement at that time, and my wife was expecting, or maybe Nathan was born by that time. Yes, and this kind of coincided, and this whole notion about a child fearing for death, a 5-year-old. I think that struck a chord between both of us, and that's what led into the personal journey from there. Then, of course, the uncle, my family, and everything. I have no rational answer to this, Alok. Sorry, it's right.
No,
It's
that
not a
was
rational
fantastic.
act
Thank you so much.
at all, right? Yes.
Thank you for that, Jude. You mentioned early on the dismemberment of the railways, which is something that you kind of foreground in the film as well. And I also wanted to ask you a little bit about reenacting, because there's a couple of scenes in the film where, people are reenacting, in a sense, the kind of different kinds of, disguise to escape from violence. For example, dressing in different clothes, wiping off their pottu, and then you did have the scene of the person sawing the railway. So I just wanted to ask, why you made that choice, and how did people who you were filming, what were their reactions to that kind of reenactment?
Yeah, so that was, of course, Raisa, it's solely due to Ritipan's S21, the film that really, stuck a wedge into me while I was thinking about making demons, and so I happened to watch Ritipan's S21, which is on the torture camps in Khmer Rouge, Cambodia, right? And in that, Ritipan uses this filmic trope of reenactment, which I thought was, because he brings back these former rebels and asks them to perform what they did, like in what Roman mentioned about how in the act of killing as well. And it's a tradition, but it's only later on that I found out that the tradition actually starts with Claude Lanzmann with Shoah, right? Claude Lanzmann had done it with the Holocaust, and it's a 4-episode magnum opus by Lanzmann, and then through Ritipan I discovered Lanzmann, and while making demons, the act of killing came in as well. So demons, I think, was released after act of killing. Yes, if I remember the timeline correctly. So so that was one big influence on me, and because how do you revisit a past when it has kind of traumatic memory, other than in a fictitious sense, was the real question, right? And then this whole idea of taking people back to those places, it is not until I actually took those people that I realized that places, objects, things, spaces do react on you or act on you, and you react to them somehow, right? And I guess that's something almost otherworldly. There's an otherworldliness in taking people to those spaces. So every time I wanted to reenact, I made sure that that's what Lanzmann had done and Ritipan had done, or even the director of I forget his name, but anyway, of the act of killing had done is to take people back to those very places where these traumatic events took place. And I think those have an effect on you, and they act upon you, or they react upon you, and then you act upon them. So there is a kind of a connection that goes on there.
Wow, thank you, Jude. So moving a little bit on a different side, I found the approach to music in this film somewhat unique, and it gave me a sense of horror at times, like there was something about to happen, and I was sort of waiting for it. Can you speak about the music and sound design process during the post production of this film?
Yeah, so the composer that I worked with is a good friend of mine, and we had been so ever since I came down from Kandy to Colombo, we had been friends for like a long time. When we started making the film, we had been already friends for a decade, and you wouldn't believe that the very first English film that he saw with me, that I showed him at my place, was Godfather, right? So that's the very first film that he saw, the English film that he saw with me, and I guess the impact that the Godfather had on him, and then when we started working on it, and if you looked at the music of Godfather, it's very interesting that music occurs as an afterthought always, right? It occurs as an afterthought, holding this the imagic space as a hologram, right? So and he's also an IT engineer, my friend. So he and I, when we started, I'm just trying to tell the process. Of course, I don't know how the composing and the
Of course.
horror part, right? But I'm just trying to talk about the composing part of it, so how we worked was that every time he looked at a scene, we discussed that the music shouldn't intrude into it because it would intrude the space of the image. And then music should sit as a space by itself and be an afterthought. And of course the horror and then the sense of horror is I think quite is pervaded throughout the film, isn't it? And for me, putting the camera on the train was always about fear. Always about. That's one thing I would talk with the cinematographer would say. I mean, shoot it as the scariest thing in the world you'd ever see, right? And that's how we approached the train. And so that's why I say that you have this. Probably I'm reminded of. Jung here, who I think said that where your greatest fear, that's where your work is, right? So it's kind of a paradoxical relationship that you have with this object.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Jude. And before I get into the next question, I'm just going to play a clip that kind of relates to the question from the film.
What I'm thinking now is like, இப்போ நான் என்ன யோசிக்கிறேன்னு உண்மையில இப்போ நான் ஒரு ஆள் தான் வந்திருந்து செய்கிறேன். உண்மையில இன்றைக்கு எத்தனையோ பேர் இந்த டெலோ அடிப்படையில் இருந்தாக்கள் எத்தனையோ பேர் குறிப்பாக ஜஃப்னா கேம்பில் இருந்தாக்கள் நிறைய பேர் இன்றைக்கு ஐ நோ தே ஆர் அலைவ், தே ஆர் லிவிங் இன் கனடாவில் பிள்ளைகளோட என்னோட இருக்கிறாங்க. they're living happily, but I don't know அவங்களுக்கு மனசாட்சி உறுத்துமா அல்லது அவங்களை இதை பற்றி கதைப்பாங்களா அல்லது they still think what they did is right. இன்னைக்கு எங்களோட சனவெல்லாம் மறந்துட்டு இப்போ படங்கள் பார்க்குறதும் தென்னிந்திய சினிமாக்கெல்லாம் நுழைஞ்சி அதுக்குள்ளே போய் தங்களை மறக்கிறதான் போயிருந்தே ஒழிய தங்களுக்குள்ள ஒரு பெரிய எத்தனையோ விஷயங்கள் நடந்திருக்கின்றது. நான் நினைக்கல எங்களுடைய ஆக்கள் அதை ரியலைஸ் பண்ணிவிட மாட்டேன். இப்படி ஒரு குரூவலான விஷயங்களுக்கு நாங்கள் ஹெல்ப் பண்ணியிருக்கிறோமே. இதுவும் டெலோ அடித்தது நீ யூ கான் சே எனி ரீசனே சொல்ல முடியாது. பிகாஸ் ஓகே யூ கோ அண்ட் ஹேவ் அ டோக் வித் தம் அண்ட் அட்லீஸ்ட் ஒரு டோக் கதைச்சி இதண்டு செஞ்சுருக்கலாம். அது ஒன்றும் செய்யலை தானே. ஜஸ்ட் ஓகே அவங்க பிடிச்சோன்னா போய் அடித்தோம், என்ன அடிச்சுட்டு killed all of them, 800-900 people those days. It's a big number. It's a big number. நாங்கள் இப்போ கவுண்ட் பண்ணுறோம், 10,000 30,000 கவுண்ட் பண்ணி கொண்டிருக்கோம். But 800 in those days and trained people, and those people were like மக்களுக்காக ஏதோ செய்யணும் என்று போன ஆக்கள். என்ன அவ்வளோ வேறையும் சிம்பிளாக சுட்டு கொண்டு வேண்டா எங்களை மாதிரி ஒரு க்ரூவல் பீப்புள். ஐ டோன்ட் திங்க் போராட்டத்தின் பேரால் யூ கான் அக்செப்ட் that shouldn't be accepted. But well, who's there to answer now? There's no one.
So my next question is also on something that was very much a theme in your film, which is on silence within the Tamil community. I think what kind of marked out your film was that you were very critical of Tamil militant formations, including the LTTE. So I wanted to start off by asking you, why do you think there is this silence when it comes to criticism of some of these groups?
Simply, it's because of fear, isn't it? It's fear. Fear dominates, and when there is fear, there is work to be done. And when you don't want to do the work, then there is repression, right? And there's repression, and if I may just stretch on that question a little bit, Raisa, I guess that it's easy for us to kind of put it all on the LTT, the militants, and say, oh, this was a past that was there, and there was this atrocity, and now it's over, and it's gone. I would say it was only evident then. Now it's more discreet. That's what I meant. So the fear that had come through the hegemony of colonialism is still there. It's lurking there. It's just that Demons in Paradise was only an attempt to look it in the eye through the historical moment of the militant massacres. So that's why people ask me, your film is not historically accurate because there were other things. Because I was not making a historical film. I was interested in something else. Right. Right. So in that sense, I would say the fear has now metamorphosed itself into more subtle, more clever ways of pervading spaces. And when I say spaces, it's a space of the mind, or of something that lies within all of us, right? And it is also because of that I also sense that to confront it, either in Jaffna or in Sri Lanka, which has not been screened still to the public, this is something I will bring up here, is due to that fear of confronting this. Right? It's not just the LTTE. LTTE was only, or the militant massacre was only the visible enactment of that fear.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Jude. You earlier mentioned that your producer is a French person, and so was some of your crew, I believe, and you worked with a French editor. And this is not uncommon these days. Films are produced internationally, documentary films are produced internationally these days. But what was the editing and scriptwriting process, which was not in French, let's say, is what was that like for you? And also, were there a lot of translations and back and forth? And do you think on a certain level as an editor, it helped the editor to not know the language?
Well, how do I say that? First of all, I have to say there was very little choice I had whom I would work with, right, in the process. But in hindsight, I'm so glad that I ended up working with the French per se, right? Because of the sensibilities that they bring into the cinematic world of documentary, and perceiving, like people like Chris Marker and Alan Rennie, who had broken this feeling of perceiving reality as something didactic and factual, and it was done long time back, right? So that helped me in a sense to delve more into the deeper questions of existence and things like that, right? And but in the writing process, of course, I would say in hindsight, I would say there was a blessing in disguise also, because I was bothered less by the producer because of the distance as well. There was no pressure, because the people asked me, why did you take 10 years to make the film? Partly because it took its own time to ferment and all that. And also the producer, I mean, they don't make just one film, they make other films as well. This was just one part of it. And so I was left alone on my own to kind of deal with the structure. And mainly the writing process was to understand what I am trying to deal with here. And that's what I learned in the process of making the film with the French, is that when I went to France for the first time and they said you have to write something for the documentary, it was ludicrous to me. I was thinking, I mean, how do you write something that you want to already that exists outside? But then it's through the writing that you actually take the power. And I'm reminded of Bresson here, who said by that writing process, you actually you're creating this reality to somehow, if I may dare use this term, to serve the mind that precedes. So that's what that I encountered when I went to film with the camera. Those moments that popped up with these people, I could have never even imagined those moments. But again, to put it in the loop, there was this moment of sitting and thinking and the structure emerging that actually led the mind to proceed somehow. And that's what popped up with these people coming from nowhere. And even the last scene that we did with the militants, it wouldn't have been strong if not for a actual almost a physical clash with a group of youngsters in Telipalai area where we wanted to actually film it, and that somehow boosted these former militants to come and sit in front of the fire and really come out in that sense, which I mean, then one wonders who's actually directing the film, right? So yeah, so this was something that working with the French was something that I wouldn't have even imagined if I had been in Sri Lanka. I'm not trying to run down, but what I meant by being in Sri Lanka is that the notion of understanding cinema and encountering reality wouldn't have been as rich if I hadn't had the exposure with But having said that, all the crew was from, of course, the editing was done, and that was also a choice. And I wanted to work with a female editor because editing was all about they say swing, but also it's about dancing in some sense. It's a dancing thing for me. So there's something very feminine about editing. So I don't know. So that and she had worked on a film on Rwanda previously, and all that I think helped.
Great, thank you,
and
thank
again,
you, Jude.
These are not rational choices, right? They're really on the on the gut, right? You go by gut.
Great.
And I trust my gut more than anything else.
Right. Speaking of emotion, we do have to bring up that I believe it was in 2018, the film was due to be screened in Jaffna at the Jaffna Film Festival, and then it was pulled from the lineup. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the circumstances surrounding that, why it was pulled from the lineup, and what that kind of indicates.
As I said, as I alluded to it already, Raisa, that it's the uneasiness to confront fear, right? And it was not just about Jaffna. Again, I want to reiterate that it's not just about Jaffna. There was a whole political aura to it, right? And it's easy to kind of, again, as it is easy to put everything on the LTT and so it was just a horrible past of the LTT. But one has to ask what created the conditions. That's the question one needs to ask. Who created the conditions, right? So it's the same with the Jaffna International Film Festival as well. So there, what came up was this again, this fear to confront the the what I call the invaded space, right? Not just by the commoner of Jaffna, but I would say, I think this is more of a, that's where the politics comes. And this is more of a problem of who wields power and who doesn't want to look in the eye, or who doesn't want people to look it in the eye is what came up in Jaffna. So I would rather stop there with regards to Jaffna.
Sure.
But on moving forward, like how is the Tamil community reacted to the film in your experience? Those who have managed to see it, and was there a difference in reactions in Jaffna versus in Colombo, for example?
Yeah, if you take it as a whole, the Tamil community's reaction per se has been of one of silence so far. Right? Those who have probably aligned with the film would keep silence as well, and those who are against it also would keep silence as well. So this is what I could say about. But again, I would not only just confine this to, for instance, I would probably bring this up here. I am still surprised, and I still wonder, but I think I know why that is as well. Even though the film was supported by one of the international film festivals while it was being made, but once the film made it to a place like Cannes, we can talk about Cannes in a different sense. It's not. I'm not saying that's an absolute place to go to, but what I'm saying is, in a cinematic sense, you want to end up somewhere in a place like Cannes. But then this festival, which had supported you, didn't want to screen the film. That was not in Jaffna. This was somewhere else. I'm not going to mention the festival's name, but I'm saying this was somewhere else, totally away from Sri Lanka, that had nothing to do with Jaffna, with LTT, with why?
Thank you for that. And I also was wondering whether you view this film differently in the current context, given this past where there was just recently, last year, there were these protests around the economic crisis. And in the backdrop of that, there were these questions that were then being raised about memorialization, about Sri Lanka's past and the civil war. So, in light of those discussions that began happening around the protests, I'm wondering if you view it differently, or would you say that some of the issues that you are trying to tackle in the film still remain the same?
Well, with regard to the protest, I could only say what's close to me, because I was not part of it to begin with. But then at one point during the protest, the film was requested by the organizers. Then I said I would give the film, but then the reply came to me saying that the film is not relevant to the protest, right? So I guess, confronting can happen in two ways. And confronting is always about movements for me. It's a movement. That's why we call any protest also as movement, right? As something that moves. But what this tells me is that there can be real movements and fake movements. This is what it tells me. So for me, I'm now very apprehensive about movements, right? So even cinema is a form of movement for you, right? And so it could easily deceive you. The movement can actually easily deceive you of making the discernment between what is a real movement and a fake movement. It's a very philosophical answer, I know, but but this is the only way I could talk about resistance, revolutions, and protests and things like that.
I believe Raisa will play a small clip before the
Sure.
next question.
Also, before I do that, just to also tell everyone who's listening that if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat box and we'll try to take them at the end. I've got one question already. So if you have any questions, please ask them.
මතකද මාව?
මම නම් හරි.
ඔයාගේ නම හරිනේ?
මගේ නම හරි.
ඔව්. මාව මතකද?
මට මේ ඔළුවට එන්නේ ඒකයි මේ කල්පනා කරන්නේ.
අයියා නිමල්නේ?
ඔව්.
විජේ බාසුනගේ පුතා නේද?
ඔක්කොම හරි.
මතක නැහැ?
තාම ඔළුවට ආවේ නැහැ ඒකයි. පොඩ්ඩක් මතක් කරන්න.
සින්නාලේ.
ඒකනේ කියන්නේ හරි.
කොහොමද?
ඉතින් ගත් කාලේ ගිහින්.
මොකද මේ මූණ එහෙමනේ?
අත්තමයි මතක නැහැ. ඔව්. හරි.
සින්නාලේ මතකද?
මතකයි.
මතකයිනේ?
මතකයි. මේ නීති.
ඔව්.
ඒකනේ කියන්නේ. දැන් කොයිද?
දැන් මම රට කැනඩාවේ ඉන්නවා.
කලින් හිටියේ මේ මෙහි නේද කොහෙද මේ?
මන්නාර.
මන්නාරමින් හිටියේ.
අපි ගියානේ මතකයිනේ?
මතකයි. තාම දැන් ගේ කෙනෙක් මේ විකුලා දැන් සිංහල කෙනෙක් ඉන්නේ.
ඇත්ත?
ඔව්.
කො අයියා නිමල්.
නුවණ කරන්නේ
ඇත්ත? ඒකේ මාමා ඉන්නවා තාම. දීපි.
අම්මා තාත්තා දෙන්නේ.
අම්මා අඳුරගන්නේ ඉතින් කියලා.
අඳුරගන්නේ තාත්තා අඳුරගන්නේ කියලා.
තාත්තා බලනවා. අඳුරගත්තා. විජේ බාසුන නෑ?
ඔව්.
මාව මතකද?
කොයි මේ කෙලවල?
අම්මට මතකද මාව?
ඈ? අම්මා තින්නාන්නේ. මතක් දන්නේ මතක්
කොයි කාලෙද පුතේ? කොයි කාලයක්ද නේද?
ඔව්.
කොයිද ඉන්නේ?
මම දැන් ඉන්නේ රට.
රටද?
ඔව් කැනඩාවේ
මම ඔය ගෙදර යන් කියලා එකන් ආවේ.
නම් බුදුනේ හරණයි අප්පා.
I'm going to go ahead and ask the question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry. Hi, Jude. So, how would you describe the state of Tamil nationalism today from your perspective? And is it united or fractured?
Quite a binary question for me. It's not so binary to look at. I would put it this way, Alok. You know, for instance, how do you confront fear? Is how I would begin by asking about going into the question of nationalism, right? And it's something that comes through the fear of losing one's identity, of one's past, of one's but then I think it's interesting that by being anti-fear, you actually become slave to the fear, right? And so anti this, anti that, anti this, it only leads you into a sense of more and more metamorphosing, and not really going beyond the fear. Right? But if you ask me, then it comes down to a very singular, a case of singularity of each person, what one carries within oneself, and then that becomes the community, the national, and all that, right? So to confront this is something that I find that in a political space which has not done how would I put it, which has not done much work so far. It has only been being anti, and by through it being anti, it actually becomes slave to the very thing that it wants to get rid of. And for me, Tamil nationalism is only one case of that. Then we can talk about many nationalisms then, right? But to talk of Tamil nationalism, it has only just metamorphosed itself into anti that, anti this, and it has only remained within that fear psychosis.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we have lost Raisa, so I'm gonna ask the next question as well.
Sure.
Hopefully she'll be back soon. This is
I just joined again. Sorry,
okay,
sorry
great.
about
Over to you, Raisa.
Yes, sorry about the technical difficulties, but just wanted to also ask, as we said earlier, Demons in Paradise is very much a personal story and a personal history. So I guess we just wanted to ask why you think personal histories are so important, and why do you think it's important to tell during times of conflict?
I would agree and disagree with you, Raisa, in the sense it is a personal film, but then it goes beyond the person of the self of so-called Jude Ratnam, of being Tamil, living in Sri Lanka, and why does it resonate with somebody? And that's the power of any art, and especially of cinema, is that I think that's why I talked about the notion of movement is very key for me to understand image, right? In the sense, like, who is a person? Like, are you this person who's told you are like, you are a Tamil and you have been born to create a state for yourself, and for that you will fight, for that you will kill people, and then eventually you will have the space. Is something that I think the film questions, in a sense. And I'm also very tired of all these biographies nowadays. Everybody wants to make biographies today, and to confine themselves to this monad, which in a sense says, oh, I am this and that's all I am. And for me, any image is not something that could be confined. There is an eternal movement within the image that keeps changing, right? And unless you let that movement go through you, the real movement to go through you, then you will see the becoming or the changing, which is essential for not just for individuals, but for communities, for families, for nations, and I think what we are with me being a Tamil and all that, I think what it alludes is that we are stuck in this monad, and we are not letting the movement to go through. And I don't, and that's the claim in the film at the end of the film, which became very popular with BBC flaunting it on the pages of saying, I wished my people dead, even though they were being killed, and I became a traitor. And that claim of being traitor is to this. Is the resistance to become this monad, right? And so what's personal in that sense for me? It is, yes, finally personal is political, but personal is something that actually eludes the person as well, somehow.
Interesting. Thank you for that, Jude. I also just want to ask a question that came from the audience that was sent to me. So this person was asking about this particular scene in the movie, from which was pulled from one of the clips, where someone was describing being given Tamils kind of handing out Coke bottles to people who were kind of standing guard during a particular massacre. And this person was asking about the role of ordinary people who are witnessing violence, and what personal memories you had from your life of ordinary people kind of standing by and kind of witnessing violence, and and kind of spectating in the same way, whether you had personal memories of that.
Oh, that's everywhere today, isn't it? You walk into a movie from South India and you will see it. You 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 witness the violence, and you enjoy it in some sense, in the name of your community or justice. Or I'm sorry, I'm being a little light, and but isn't that the whole question, isn't it? Is what is to witness something, and then to justify something? Of course, I didn't, in my younger days, I never witnessed anything in that sort, but probably in Kandy, when I was living, I had seen, or even that I've only heard that the bodies were floating in Mahaveli River. That was during the insurrection in '89 of the South, right? Right, but um, uh, so again, it's again easy for one to say, "Oh, this is something outside of me that's happening." But who creates the conditions? How are the conditions created? Is my question, right? So, and that is something that I think we need to confront as singular beings initially, and that's where, for me, the hope of cinema is, because you could sit in a darkened room and still be addressed in a singular manner through cinema.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, Rice, I'm gonna ask the next audience question.
Sure.
So somebody asked, Jack Healy, formerly of Amnesty International, once said that dissidents often end up mirroring the behavior of their oppressor. This has happened in Burma too. For example, the Posha massacres, where ABSDF turned against each other, accusing 18 of being junta spies, and torturing and killing them in a pit on the Burma-China border. What are your thoughts on this? And by this, the quotation that dissidents often end up mirroring the behavior of their oppressors.
Yeah, so that's probably that. If I'm not entirely moving away from what the question is that's exactly what I meant by becoming anti something, right? By being a dissident of something, and actually, but you eventually turn into that, and the whole point of the question of justice is quite dangerous. Then it becomes very dangerous, right? It becomes quite dangerous, because then it justifies anything for that, right? And it's only a mirroring effect of the oppressor, and in a sense, it's something like people like Paulo Coelho had already written about, in seeing this in South America, right? So, yeah, I would rather agree, yes. But to add to it is that, but how do you how do you address this? There's only one way, is to confront your fears. Is the only way. There's no other way. There's no other way.
Thank you. And we have one more question from the audience. So this is kind of adding on to what I asked earlier. Jude, at one point you say near the end of the documentary that violence was somewhat rooted within the Tamil community. And this person is asking whether it was the silence of the community that made you feel that way, or what exactly it was that made you feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. The silence that was within me. That was the whole point, isn't it? It was there. It was lurking there. It was lurking within you. So, am I holier than thou person from my community? No, it couldn't have been. I'm part and parcel of it, and it was lurking within me. It is just that through cinema, I confronted it. I'm not saying everybody has to make a film to confront it. It can be confronted in the most mundanest of senses, I guess, if you have the courage to do so.
Thank you for that, Jude. Sorry, go
Yes.
ahead.
No, yeah, thank you, Jude. I think we are at the end, right, Rice?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jude. Thank you from both of us, of course, and from the Himal team and from South Asia, of course. Screen South Asia is a monthly screening event with a Q&A followed up that is jointly run by Film South Asia and Himal South Asian, and it is organized by Himal South Asian, where we screen films from South Asia's archives. And today we had the honor of inviting Jude Ratnam here. Thank you again, Jude, and I think we're going to end here. If you have any last words, otherwise we're going to end.
No, thank you, Alok. Thank you, Raisa, Roman, and Shweta for having me today, and the rest of the team, whoever is behind this. It's been a pleasure, and I hope more than my words, which only makes 2 cents, the film would make more sense to the viewers.
Thank you so much, Jude.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.